It was just after sunrise when Nurse Emily Carter started her shift at Ridgeview Memorial. The hall smelled faintly of disinfectant, the overhead lights buzzed quietly, and the hospital was already humming with patients and chaos. Emily, with her warm smile and calming presence, was the kind of nurse everyone trusted instantly. Veterans especially felt safe with her, maybe because her late father had served, and she always treated them with an extra layer of respect. That morning, room 309 had a new patient, an older man named Walter Briggs, Vietnam vet, no visitors, no family listed, just a worn duffel bag and a medical file thick with problems. Emily walked in, smiled gently, and greeted him. "Morning, Mr. Briggs. I'm Emily. I'll be taking care of you today." His eyes barely lifted. He looked tired in a way that went deeper than pain. His clothes were old, and it was clear he hadn't been sleeping well before he came in. She adjusted his blanket and checked his IV, then noticed his hand trembling slightly. "You hungry?" she asked softly. He gave a faint nod. Lunch was still hours away, and technically, nurses weren't allowed to bring outside food. But Emily had packed an extra sandwich that morning, peanut butter and banana, her dad's old favourite. Without hesitation, she offered it to Mr. Briggs. He hesitated, then took it with a soft, "Thank you, no one saw it." No one was supposed to. But the next morning, during shift briefing, her supervisor called her out in front of the whole team. "Nurse Carter, did you share your personal lunch with a patient yesterday?" The room went quiet. Emily nodded, confused. "He hadn't eaten. He's a veteran." "I didn't think you didn't think," the supervisor snapped. "That's the problem. You violated policy." She was stunned. A warning, a reprimand, number. They suspended her, right there, in front of everyone. But as she walked out of the hospital, head spinning and heart pounding, someone was already watching from afar. Someone with stars on his shoulder, and a past that tied him to Walter Briggs in a way Emily couldn't have imagined. Major General Thomas R. Dalton had seen war, loss, and loyalty in its rawest forms. Now retired, he didn't spend his days behind polished desks anymore. He volunteered at veteran outreach centers, visited wounded soldiers, and kept an eye on friends still fighting silent battles like Walter Briggs. When Walter didn't show up for their usual Tuesday coffee meetup at the VFW hall, Dalton grew concerned. After a few calls, he tracked him down to Ridgeview Memorial. Walter's health had worsened, and the hospital had admitted him quietly. No press, no flags. Just another old soldier in a cold bed. Dalton showed up the next morning wearing plain clothes and a cap that read U.S. Army Retired. He walked through the hospital lobby unnoticed, until a nurse at the front desk spotted the service patch on his sleeve and stood a little straighter. Walter's condition was stable, but it wasn't what caught Dalton off guard. It was the way Walter spoke about the nurse from the day before. "She didn't treat me like I was a burden." Walter mumbled, "Gave me a sandwich, sat with me like a daughter would. They fired her for that." Dalton's jaw tightened. Suspended Walter corrected himself. "Still wrong," Dalton nodded once, then stood. His voice, though calm, had the unmistakable edge of command. "What's her name? Emily Carter." That afternoon, Dalton didn't call. He didn't write a letter. He walked straight into the hospital's administrative wing, calmly requested to speak with the chief medical officer, and waited. When the administrator finally came out with a polite smile, Dalton didn't return it. "I'm here about Nurse Carter," he said. "I understand she was suspended for an act of compassion, for feeding a hungry veteran, a veteran who served under my command." The administrator blinked, caught off guard. "Sir, this is hospital policy. That policy just made the worst mistake of its life." Dalton cut in. "Because punishing kindness? That's not a policy, that's a disgrace." The room fell still. Emily, at home on her couch still processing the shock, had no idea that her small act of kindness was about to send shockwaves through not just the hospital, but the entire country. Emily sat curled up on her couch, still wearing her scrubs from the day before. The suspension felt like a punch that wouldn't stop hurting. She replayed the moment over and over how a single sandwich, offered out of kindness, had unraveled everything. She wasn't thinking about rules. She was thinking about a man who looked like her father in his final days alone, proud and quietly suffering. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. She almost ignored it, but answered on instinct. "Hello." Miss Carter came a deep, commanding voice. "This is Major General Thomas Dalton. I believe you cared for a friend of mine." "Walter Briggs." Emily sat up straighter. "Yes, sir. I hope he's okay. He's fine. Thanks to you. I'd like to meet." Today, Emily's heart raced. "Of course, we're lobby of Ridgeview Memorial." 15 minutes. She didn't even change. She grabbed her ID, threw on a hoodie, and rushed out the door. When she arrived, she spotted him immediately. Tall, silver hair, eyes that had seen too much. He was talking to a reporter. Then she noticed the cameras, not one, not two, but 3 local news crews were parked outside. She froze. Dalton turned, locked eyes with her, and gave a respectful nod. "Emily Carter," he said loudly. The nurse who did what this hospital should have done showed humanity. A microphone swung toward her. Reporters started firing questions. "Were you really suspended for feeding a veteran? Do you regret it? What would you say to the hospital now?" She blinked, overwhelmed. Dalton raised a hand. The crowd hushed. "I served 38 years, he said, voice booming. "I've seen acts of courage on the battlefield." But what Nurse Carter did, that's moral courage, and it deserves honor, not punishment. Inside the hospital, staff watched from windows. Phones buzzed. The story spread like wildfire. Nurse suspended for helping veteran general speaks out. The hospital's board called an emergency meeting. Meanwhile, Emily stood stunned as the crowd grew. She hadn't asked for attention. She just fed a hungry man. But that small act was now part of something much, much bigger. By that evening, Emily's name was everywhere. Local news ran the story on prime time. Social media picked it up. And hashtags like, "Yeah, stand with Nurse Emily," and "Veteran Care Matters" began trending across the country. Thousands of comments poured in. Nurses, veterans, and everyday people outraged at what had happened inside Ridgeview Memorial. Panic set. In the hospital's PR teams scrambled to draft statements. The chief medical officer, Dr. Karen Winslow, sat in her office watching the footage of General Dalton's speech on loop. She rubbed her temples, knowing the damage was spiraling. "People don't care about policies right now," her assistant whispered. "They care that we punish someone for being decent." Dr. Winslow exhaled slowly. "Get me the board." Now. Meanwhile, Emily stayed at home, overwhelmed by the messages flooding her inbox. Some were from patients she'd cared for over the years, others from strangers offering jobs, encouragement, even donations. But amid all the support, her heart stayed with Mr. Briggs. She hadn't heard anything about him since the news broke. A soft knock at her door pulled her back to the moment she opened it and froze. Walter Briggs stood there, leaning on a cane, flanked by General Dalton, Mr. Briggs. She gasped. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in a bed." He chuckled. "They said I could leave. And I told the general the first place I wanted to go was here. Emily led them in, still stunned." Walter sat down slowly, eyes glassy. "You treated me like a human when no one else did," he said. "And I heard you got punished for it. That ain't right." Emily knelt beside him. "I didn't do anything special." Dalton stepped in. "You did more than most people ever will, and now people are listening." Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from the hospital. She hesitated, then answered. "Miss Carter," said a tight voice on the other end. "This is Dr. Winslow. The board has met. We'd like to formally rescind your suspension." Emily's breath caught. "We'd also like to speak to you about a different role. Leadership, advocacy. Something tells us you're not just a good nurse. You're the kind we need to lead change." As she hung up, heart pounding, Walter smiled gently. Looks like that sandwich went a long way.